This week, we're flying from Beijing to Shanghai. Not on an Airbus or a Boeing. No, we're doing it on a Comac, the C919, China's second homegrown passenger jet. Let's see how it compares to its rivals, but more importantly, after doing arguably too much reading on this topic, I've become convinced that we'll all be flying on these things in the next 20, 30, 40 years. So let me try and convince you of this too. Flying to Shanghai tonight. It's like 5 o'clock right now, 5:30. This isn't like a normal domestic China flight. It's on a Comac C919. I'm finally doing it. I did the other one. Wow, so they kind of sell it. They got C919 on the boards.
Beijing to Shanghai.
Yes, okay.
Seat 51.
Okay.
IOC.
Yep, no worries. Every time I've checked in China, it's been the most incredibly quick experience. Anyway, this airport, I read about this airport on the internet, but it doesn't really hit you until you actually get here and go, oh my God, what is that roof? It is incredible. Look at it. Airport's wild. This is Beijing's Daxing Airport. This is the newer of the two airports in Beijing. It opened in 2019. And this place is incredible. It's nicknamed the Starfish. It was designed by Zaha Hadid. I'm not exactly a person that appreciates great architecture generally, but I noticed how magnificent this place was. Even Beijing's other airport, Beijing Capital, that place, at least Terminal 3, was magnificent as well. Beijing has some very impressive airports. I was warned of this before coming, but it's been confirmed. You know what I'm doing? I'm walking down the wrong wing. While I figure out where to go, I'm going to let future Simon talk a little bit about Comac, why it exists, how it exists, the past, the present, the future. The past, the present, the future, that is a lot. And so instead of sitting here and narrating the whole history of China and planes, let's instead break this down into a couple of big questions. Firstly, what is Comac? How did it come to be? And secondly, why the C919 is such a big deal? And what does it all mean for the future? Let's start with Comac, or the Commercial Aircraft Corporation of China. It's a state-owned aerospace manufacturer formed in 2008, but its roots stretch all the way back to the 1950s. After the founding of the People's Republic of China in 1949, the government established AVIC, the Aviation Industry Corporation of China, to manufacture aircraft, primarily military jets licensed from the Soviet Union. This was all well and good, except by the late 1950s, China took a rather drastic turn when Mao implemented the Great Leap Forward. This grand plan, launched in 1958, aimed to transform the country into an industrial powerhouse. Though in practice, rural farmers were tasked with backyard steel smelting, among other unorthodox measures. This led to a widespread famine and more generally led to the entire Chinese economy to go backwards for a whole decade. All plane manufacturing desires, and well, the whole country's desires, were really shelved until a major turning point came about in 1972 when US President Richard Nixon visited China. This marked the end of China's isolationist policies, and it helped re-energize the economy as the country began trading more with the outside world. And this is when we get China's first attempts to build a passenger jet, the Shanghai Y-10. This medium-range airliner bore a close resemblance to the Boeing 707. It's alleged that a Pakistan Airlines 707 that happened to crash in China was studied quite closely by engineers, but the Y-10 ended up having no structural commonality with the 707. It was dimensionally different, though it looks rather similar. Either way, after a 10-year development process, 3 prototype Y-10s were built and test flown in the early 1980s. By 1983, the program was shut down and the jet never reached production. The official reason was due to high costs and outdated technologies, which was all true. By the early 80s, the 707 was a 30-year-old design and Boeing was making 747s and 767s. Airbus had been established and were making A300s. But politics also came into play here too. The Y-10 project was linked to Wang Hongwen, a member of the Gang of Four. If you know your Chinese history, you'll know what I'm talking about, but this just made it overall a pretty sensitive project after his fall from power. Interestingly, if you look very closely when departing from Shanghai's Pudong Airport, you can see the Comac factories and you can actually see one of these prototype Y-10s. It's displayed just out the front of one of the buildings. China did not give up on building local jets though. In 1985, the Shanghai Aviation Industrial Corporation, later a key component of Comac, signed a joint production agreement with McDonnell Douglas to build MD-80s and MD-90s in China. The plan was for 26 aircraft, of which 20 MD-80s and 2 MD-90s were ultimately produced. However, after McDonnell Douglas merged with Boeing in 1997, the program was cancelled. Allegedly, upon cancellation of the program, China refused to return the tooling to McDonnell Douglas, and this subsequently laid the groundwork for China's first homegrown jet. Launched in 2002, this effort became known as the ARJ-21, or the Advanced Regional Jet for the 21st Century. It took them quite a long time to actually make production aircraft, with the first one entering service with Chengdu Airlines in 2016. While it hasn't captured the global regional jet market, the ARJ-21 is significant as it's Comac's first in-house passenger plane. I flew on one of the first ones to fly outside of China, about a year and a half back. I'll link the video up here. Comac itself was officially formed in 2008, consolidating various aerospace industries under one organization. Along with this official formation of Comac, the C919 program was also launched in 2008, with an initial target maiden flight date of 2014. They were a little late, as is usual with new aircraft development, and a lot happened along the way, and we'll get to all of that soon. But first, let's just go and get on board the C919.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's incredibly similar to an A320 or a 737. We've got a very standard 3-3 economy seating configuration. China Eastern has picked a fairly comfortable seat. There's a decent amount of legroom, but overall it's nothing that special. There was two things that I sort of instantly noticed. Firstly, there's no seatback screens, but the drop-down screens that they play the safety videos on and just play movies and TV shows on during the flight. They were incredibly modern, high def. They were in a 16:9 aspect ratio. I've never seen them this modern before. Usually you get them on the 737s and they're these square old things. They were definitely nice to look at, but I guess if you're designing a plane in the 21st century, that's what you're going to go with. And the second noticeable thing was the combo reading light air vents. They've kind of combined the air vents and the reading lights into one. Kind of cool. They just glow blue when there's no light on or anything, which was a bit interesting looking throughout the cabin, but definitely a bit different and a bit noticeable. Now, unlike the full-service carriers in Australia, Europe, the US, the full-service Chinese carriers are actually full service. On this 1 hour and 59-minute flight, they served a full meal. There was a chicken main, some fruit, some cake. It was all pretty good, and more generally, just this concept of a full-service airline being actually full service is incredible.
Speaks semi-fluent Mandarin.
How does the C919 compare to the A320 and the 737? Well, I don't just want to sit here and go through some comparison tables with you, but let's just hit the main points. Dimensionally, these are all incredibly similar. They have wingspans that are practically the same, 35.8 meters with winglets, and cabin-wise, they're all roughly similar widths and lengths. Seating capacities are the same story, really. Currently, only the full-service big three Chinese carriers, Air China, China Eastern, and China Southern, are operating the C919. So they aren't going for super dense configurations, but the C919 has the ability to seat up to 192 people. The A320neo is certified for 194, and the 737 MAX 8 is 189 people. So the C919 is solidly squaring up against the 737 MAX 8 and the A320neo in terms of size and capacity. But where does it fall short? Well, firstly, range. The standard variant that's currently flying has a published range of around 4,100 kilometers, whereas the A320neo and the 737 MAX 8 have published ranges more around 6,000 to 6,500 kilometers. Secondly, fuel efficiency. Now, fuel efficiency is one of those things that's highly dependent on seat configuration and flight distance. But from what I could generally infer from what's published online, I'm getting the impression that the C919 isn't quite as fuel efficient as the 737 MAX or the A320neo, but it's slightly more efficient than the older A320 CEO, and the 737-800s or the 737 NGs. And well, this would make sense. Comac does eventually want to use Chinese-made engines. Along with the formation of Comac, the Chinese government also formed the Aero Engine Corporation of China to develop aeroplane engines. They're currently designing the CJ1000A specifically for the C919, but engines take years, and so Comac currently uses LEAP 1C engines. The 1Cs are similar to the LEAP 1As and 1Bs that are used on the A320neos and the 737 Maxes respectively. Except it's alleged that the 1C version of this engine is a downgraded, less cutting-edge design, and this was done due to the threat of IP theft from China and the AECC. Either way, it appears that Comac has designed a plane that is solid. It doesn't currently match the A320neo or the 737 MAX 8 directly in terms of efficiency, but for the Chinese big three, they're probably not lighting money on fire operating these things, which bodes well more generally for the future of Comac. In terms of list prices, it's reported that the C919 is to be in the range of about 90 to 100 million US dollars. This is lower than the 111 million for the A320neo and the 121 million for the Boeing 737 MAX. That being said, airlines rarely pay list price, so who really knows here? The Chinese airlines that are currently flying these planes are majority owned by the Chinese government, as is Comac. So I don't think list prices and the actual money side of things matter that much at this point. But in terms of overall efficiency and operating costs, Comac hasn't designed a terribly uncompetitive plane in this regard.
All right, so we're in the rear lav. There's literally a queue, so I'm not going to hold up people that much. But it's different. Definitely feels different. Just is still the same function, isn't it? So, yeah. Cool.
I had to check out the USB charging, 7.5 watts here, not terrible, but by no means incredible. This is of course down to how China Eastern configures their cabins though, so this isn't really a Comac thing. Not a bad choice by China Eastern, but not incredible. So we've seen the C919, we've checked out some of the more interesting specs and gone over the history of Comac, but what does the future hold here? Will we all be flying on Comac jets in 50 years? I was going to do some fence sitting here and say, oh, it's a very good chance, but actually I'm 100% certain that they'll be the third major player in the passenger jet business by 2070, 2075? No, that's like super realistic. Maybe even like 2050. But why? Well, it all comes down to the changes that have occurred in China over the last decade or two. They've pretty successfully, at least so far, shifted their economy away from being just the world's factory to being a full-stack producer of high-tech products. Today, they have their own companies that are producing cutting-edge electric cars, self-driving cars, drones, smartphones, cameras, large language models. The list goes on. They're up there with the US in terms of developing key new technologies. This may seem like something that just naturally occurs when your economy develops, but I'd recommend you go Google the middle income trap. I think this is a rather simplistic belief. Achieving breakthroughs in technology and science requires at least some top-down planning, and this is exactly what China's done. In 2015, the CCP introduced Made in China 2025. This was a national plan that focused on developing 10 key high-tech industries in China. The plan used targeted government subsidies, strategic intellectual property acquisition, this one's going to get a bit interesting in a second, and the mobilization of state-owned enterprises to catch up and surpass Western technology in these key industries. The 10 were new energy vehicles, IT and telecommunications, advanced robotics and AI, agricultural tech, synthetic materials, advanced electrical tech, emerging biomedicine, high-end rail infrastructure, high-tech maritime engineering, and, well, aerospace engineering. It's now 2025, so has this plan worked? Not in every industry, but in some. And overall, it's been considered a success. The best example of where this has really worked, can you guess it? Electric cars. China is well and truly the dominant producer in electric vehicles.
What do we think of the Huawei car? Who knew?
Of the 17.1 million EVs sold in 2024, China produced 64.3% of them, or at least Chinese brands did. I guess Tesla also has a factory there, so it's probably even higher, but it's pretty clear that they're dominant here. The market for EVs inside of China is huge, and they're now starting to export them globally. Brands like BYD, NIO, Zeekr are all slowly but surely becoming household names around the world. So that's the truly successful story from Made in China 2025. But what didn't really work? Well, Huawei. the Chinese telecommunications company, they've been banned by pretty much all of the Western world due to a multitude of issues, including the potential threat of espionage, IP theft, and human rights violations regarding their alleged use of Uyghurs in forced labor camps. When I say banned,
what does B-A-N-N-E-D mean?
They've been banned from selling 5G networking equipment and in some cases phones in these regions. But more impactfully, they've also been put on a blacklist by the United States that prevents any US-based companies from trading with them. This caused pretty massive issues for the company. A large chunk of the components in their phones are either manufactured or designed by US companies, and well, these phones use the Android operating system. This is developed by Google, a US company. And whilst they didn't technically lose access to Android, it's open source, they've lost access to the Google Play Store and hence access to all of the applications that go on the phones. What's a smartphone without its apps? Anyway, at the time, this seemed like it could end the company. Without components and an app store, what could they do? After a few years of massively reduced smartphone production, they have miraculously made an incredible turnaround and are back producing cutting-edge smartphones. They've gone and produced their own processors, they've created their own operating system, all in under a decade. They still face this issue of not being able to sell their phones internationally, but inside of China, they're back growing their market share, and the company is no longer burning cash. And so now the C919. I made the prediction earlier that we would all be flying on these things in 20, 30, 40, 50 years, but what could get in the way of this world domination? The first big argument that people like to make is the parts network, the servicing networks. No airlines will fly these because you can't easily get parts. I just don't think this is really ever going to be a problem. Comac is clearly taking their time with the rollout of these jets. They're starting first just in China with the Chinese big three airlines, and my guess is the first place we'll see these flying outside of China is Vietnam. And Comac will provide tons of support, servicing, and guidance here. They are clearly aware of this being a potential issue and are rolling out these planes incredibly slowly with a lot of caution. The second issue is potential bans or inability to get these jets certified internationally due to alleged and in some cases proven IP theft. In particular, in 2018, 18 individuals were charged in California with conspiring to steal aerospace trade secrets from 13 mostly US-based aerospace companies. This, along with a detailed report released from CrowdStrike, explain the two techniques used by the Chinese spy agency, JSSD, to steal trade secrets. The first was just classic hacking, phishing emails. Employees at these aerospace companies get fake job offers and fake invoices. They click on them and boom, malware gets into the system. And from there, they pull out the CAD files, engine schematics, avionic layouts. They get all this confidential corporate data. The second technique was a little more sophisticated. They go after Chinese nationals or ex-Chinese nationals who now work in US aerospace companies. They offer them the opportunity to come and speak at a Chinese university on the topics that they're experts in. It's an all-expenses-paid trip to the motherland, and they're pretty clearly told that by no means are they expected to share any confidential information. They're just coming over to inspire the youth and give them an idea of what they could be working on in the future. Except once the presentations are done, they're offered more money and they get asked more detailed questions. Slowly, over time, they convince these engineers to either install malware on their systems back at their jobs in the US, or just to send over confidential data. And this all leads to sort of the big issue here: bans, sanctions, political tensions, certifications. Obviously, the US isn't happy with China stealing trade secrets, and this will likely impact their propensity to offer a type certification for the C919. Comac has made it clear that they intend to pursue this at some point, but it's clearly a while away, and this espionage clearly has to stop for a while before the FAA will take any further steps to certify any Comac jets. Europe's EASA, their aviation authority, has been much more open to certifying the C919. It's currently in the process of being certified, so I think we could see these being bought up by European airlines a lot sooner than US airlines. I think it's interesting. Very recently, in an interview with the website Skift, Ryanair CEO Michael O'Leary said he would happily order aircraft from China if the price was right. Here's the quote: "The Chinese are basically building a A320. So if it's cheap enough, 10 or 20% cheaper than an Airbus aircraft, then we'd order it." And I think much of Asia Africa, South America. If the price is right and the lead times are reasonable, when compared to Boeing or Airbus, they will buy Comac planes. There is a very unlikely situation that could occur, and that's the US placing trade bans on Comac. This would be similar to what happened to Huawei. You never know with Trump these days or what China may do in the future, but if the US did place trade bans on Comac, this would prevent any US-based companies from trading with them. Comac uses a whole bunch of different international suppliers for parts on the C919, and so this would severely impact the program. Though unlike a decade or two ago, I think China is probably in a position to do this. They have the engineering and technological might to replace all of the US suppliers. The C919 would likely be delayed by 5 or 10 years, but eventually, 50 years down the road, it'll just be a small blip. It'll just be a flesh wound. So in conclusion, the C919 is a very familiar plane to fly on. It feels much like an A320 or a 737. Chinese airlines, they're pretty bussin', kind of great service. And China itself is truly a big engineering, technological juggernaut. And oh yeah, we'll all be flying on Comacs in 50 years. Anyway, I'll see you all in the next one. No, wait, stop the count. Just as I was finishing this edit, this article came out in the South China Morning Post. In the article, they outlined Comac's plans to produce a supersonic plane. It'll be known as the C949, and the rough timeline has it flying in 2049. Also in the article, they included this image. I've just realized that I forgot to cover the future of Comac entirely in this video, so let's briefly go over it now. I've just got ChatGPT to do a translated version of it. I've checked the main points, and I think it's got them right, but it doesn't really matter. We don't need the actual text. So let's just go through it. The next jet that Comac intends to produce is the C929. This will be a direct competitor to the Boeing Dreamliner or the A330. It'll be a long-range jet with a seating capacity of about 300. This has been known about for over a decade. They were originally working with Russia's United Aircraft Corporation on this project, but ever since the Ukraine war and all of the sanctions, they have split off and gone their own way. They'll design this one independently. And then after that, they're going to do the C939. This one has only been announced in the last year or so, and this one is intended to be a direct competitor to the 777X. It'll be a 400-seat, long-range, huge jet, lots of cargo capacity, and that was sort of the vision that was known about up until a day or two ago now. As we can see on this slide, they're kind of alluding to potentially making a double-decker plane or a supersonic plane or a triple-aisle jet. But I guess this article that has come out kind of confirms that they're heading in the supersonic direction. That'll be incredible if we get supersonic flight again. I'm a big fan, but I think all of this will depend on if they're able to make their own engines, even with the C929 and the C939. Either way, I hope I've made it clear in this video that I think they can probably do all of this. China's sort of shown that they can do anything. Anyway, a little bit extra there at the end. That's it. I'm not going to rant on forever. I'll see you all in the next one. Bye.
Simon? Is that Simon?
What's Simon?